Hello, this is Christian Ramos, and I'm going to be presenting my informative speech for my introduction to communications class. I am here with Diana Bella, Edgar, Gendry, Alejandro holding one of the cameras, and Luisito holding the other camera. And today, my informative speech is going to be dealing with the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr. Uh, we have understand by now that sometimes true leadership is reflected once you die. Whenever you die, that's when we know the impact of our leadership. By the year 2003, 2003, more than 600 cities in the United States had attached King's name to a street. I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most memorable speeches of all time within the United States. However, according to Nicholas Wapshott, who is a writer for the Huffington Post, in a 2014 article, he says, it would be easier to assume that the stirring words of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech affected Americans most of all. However, it is no surprise that there is also Martin Luther King Road in Sulaska, Zambia, and a Martin Luther King Street in Mpumalanga, South Africa, end quote. The impact, we can see it now with time, that the impact was not only a national impact, but inadvertently it became an international achievement. We didn't know that it was going to have this large impact. What can we learn from Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech? I think that yes, the passion, the substance, the content, but I think that there are also structural tools that we can use. The rhetorical aspects of this speech is great, and I think that we can learn from it. I think that we can too learn and canalize our ideas through a structure that has proven benefits in the audience. Why? Because the mechanics of a speech at the end has as much importance as the substance of the speech. With the words of Daniel Carnegie, who was an American writer and lecturer, and the developer of famous courses in self-improvement, salesmanship, corporate training, and public speaking, we understand that the purpose when it comes to public speaking is to make your audience see what you see, hear what you hear, feel what you feel. Relevant, detailed couch in concrete, colorful language is the best way to recreate the incident as it happened and to picture it to the audience minds. And I think that through Martin Luther King Jr.'s, we can learn at least three important details. We know that we should get to the point, be succinct, be brief, but that's something that is very obvious. Three things that I'm going to talk to you and share with you briefly have to do with the rhetorical aspects. The first one is going to be that of the repetition, the power of repetition of words, the repetition of phrases. Second, I'm going to talk real quick on the utilization of appropriate quotation and allusions. And thirdly, lastly, I will speak on the use of metaphors to highlight contrasting concepts. So to begin with, the repetition of powerful beginner phrases. Sometimes it's good to be a parrot. Sometimes it's good to be repetitive. And I think that Martin Luther King in his speech proved it. Anaphora, according to the Oxford Dictionary, in rhetoric, anaphora is a rhetorical device that consists of repeating a sequence of words at the beginning of neighboring clauses to affirm an idea. We use repetitions on a daily basis. Psychology has taught us that the affirmation and repetition of phrases to ourselves benefit us on a daily basis. To say to ourselves, I can do this, I can do this. So repetition helps us many times to cope with our environment, with our reality. And as Jacobson, Mr. Jacobson with the Psychology Today, as he wrote on the website, he says, there is value in affirmations of this nature because of our subconscious mind plays a major role in the actualizations of our lives and the manifestation of our desires. End quote. What we believe about ourselves, I think that can be reflected in a subconscious and conscious level. And I think that this doctor with the Psychology Today is presenting a basic idea that the significant impact the repetitions can have in our life can have outcomes in the outside world. So it does not only benefit us when we are repeating affirmative phrases to ourselves, but it can be reflected on the outside. I think that other than the function of getting a benefit for ourselves. I think that other than that, I think that there's other great benefit by repeating, because when we repeat stuff, we are emphasizing ideas. We're making clear what the ideas that we are following. The use of anaphora as a rhetorical device adds rhythm. We can hear it in MLK's speech, the rhythm that he's following. It seems as he's singing a song almost. And this rhythm works to work well with the environment. It brings pleasure to the ears of the audience that are trying to understand what he's saying. So he eliminates many barriers when he is making a rhythmical. Another thing that we can learn by the use of anaphoras, of the repetition of phrases, it is that we are appealing to the emotion of the audience. Because think about it, the more we hear a particular phrase, such as 100 years later, second second later, we're hearing it one more time. 100 years later, the emphasis that is being put there is going to not only bring emphasis but also an emotional appeal. Other phrase that is common in his speech is "now is the time." Now is the time. Also, he mentions there "we must." We must. And his most famous phrase, obviously, is that of "I have a dream," which is mentioned more than 8 times in his speech. So the benefit of repetitive phrases, of anaphora, is beneficial, and we can extract this tool for our own benefit when it comes to speech writing, for our own benefit. Second, I think that we can be a painter, not just a speaker. I think that when it comes to the use of analogies or metaphors, that is going to help the audience to grasp the idea in an easier way, especially when we don't have time to explain too much. Examples of metaphors give clarity to what can otherwise be too abstract or complex. When we give an example to someone, we make it vivid, we make it obvious, especially if it's a complex idea as freedom. And we see it in MLK's speech. Metaphors in particular allow us to associate the speech with concepts that are concrete, images that are clear, and emotions that can be felt at that moment. Some people would venture to say that we can only understand what we see in our mind. If we cannot see it with our minds, we cannot understand it, even we are hearing it. And I think that MLK's speech is a good example of this. Uh, Perhaps it could be that it is because thinking is usually a mixture of words, sentences, mental images, sensations. Thoughts are visitors who visit the central station of the mind. They come, stay a while, and then disappear, making a space for others' thoughts. Some of these thoughts stay longer, gain power, and affect the life of the person thinking them. To highlight the contrast between two abstract concepts, I think that is a good use when it comes to try to transmit an idea that otherwise, as I mentioned, can be too complex. I think that when we're using a metaphor, an analogy, we make it obvious what we are referring to. The Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. MLK's mentioned this quote, and we know what he means. We know that he's referring to this lonely island, not a literal island, but a metaphorical island that we can all relate to. So instead of trying to explain this abstract idea of discrimination and segregation, he decides to pour all this idea into one word, this lonely island, to which he refers. The other idea that he mentions, the other metaphor that he uses, is that sweltering with the heat of oppression will be transformed uh, into an oasis of freedom and justice. That is another great use of metaphors. He's equating an oasis of freedom and justice to what he comes to claim that we need as an American society to prosper. So the last one that I want to mention that I think is very important when it comes to the use of metaphors in MLK speech is that one when he says, "Rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice." Rise from the dark of desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. The last thing I want to mention is that of the use of allusions, the proper use of allusions to historical precedents, to historical backgrounds that you can use for the benefit of your speech to support your ideas on an established idea. Historians know, those who have studied history, they know that when it comes to proposing, presenting new ideas, it's always better to look at the past because, as we have learned, we can always learn from the past. And I think that MLK does a great job when it comes to making allusions to past events. Evoking historic and literary reference is a powerful speech writing technique. Why? Because it can be executed directly or indirectly. It can be from a direct quotation, or it can be just an allusion to something else that everyone is aware of. You can improve the credibility of your arguments by referring to the exact words of credible speakers, writers. It will add ethos to your speech. In 1948, King studied preaching with Robert Kingston at a seminary. Beginning his first term with Kingston's class preaching ministry, he learned all these biblical references that he later used in his speech that everyone was aware of. He had to appeal to all aspects of society, and he used a common ground, which was the biblical ideas that were already established at that time. King drafted an assignment one time for that class that revealed many of his early conception of the role of preaching and his knowledge of historical facts, which his teacher calls, according to a copy of his letters at the King Center, which is an online source, one of the most vital needs in our society. It is to use history correctly, end quote. When we look at MLK's speech, we can consider all these references a good support of his speech. MLK says 5 score years ago, he referring to Lincoln's famous Gettysburg Address speech, which began 7 years ago. So MLK is obviously making a reference to a speech that everyone had studied or at least heard about in school. This allusion is particularly poignant given that King was speaking in front of the Lincoln Memorial. He was right in front of the Lincoln Memorial, so that was very impactful at that time. He was using history to support his ideas there. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is another reference that he's extracting from the Constitution to support his ideas. Allusion at the end, it's a great tool, and I think that the best great tool, as I was mentioning previously, is the use of biblical allusions. I think that the most knowledgeable allusion that he makes in his speech is that of let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-falling ocean. And he's quoting Amos chapter 5 verse 24 when he says, let justice roll down like a mighty river and justice like a mighty stream. And I think that we have understand by now that we can use and extract with the use of these rhetorical tools and use it for our own benefit. I think that we have understand by now, and hopefully you can make a good use of these 3 things that I presented to you. The use of anaphoras, the repetition of phrases, also the good use of metaphors that can bring life to the ideas that you want to present to the people that perhaps could be too abstract. And at the end, also make a good use of reference, historical background, good allusions to maybe common knowledge that you can use to benefit the people. So with this, I want to conclude my short speech and hoping that you have learned many things and that perhaps you're going to use it for your own speech writing skills. So thank you.